And welcome back, everyone, to Music of the Year. I am continuing to be your host, Stephen Meyerink, Taylor's on the boards. Continuing to be your co-host is Caitlin Argyros.
Hi, Link is our on the boards.
And continuing to be your co-host.
Hi, Mike Salbato, Mike on the boards.
And joining us is another super amazing, wonderful guest who was with us last year and has graciously agreed to join us as a super guest to diversify our picks and make us all look classier, Jayson Napolitano.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Not at all. Thank you for joining us again. When we were planning the episode, you made your picks, and I remember Mike either texted me or wrote in the email. He was like, holy crap, I don't know what any of this is. And that's always a good sign. Always awesome to get something in here that the rest of us haven't chosen. I mean, that's part of why I love having guests that aren't necessarily from RPGFan, just because, you know, we all sort of exist in this insular community of just picking things that we love. And we talk so much that I think we tend to sort of develop some similar tastes sometimes. So it's good to branch out and have things such as the ones you've selected. So, Jayson, do you want to briefly introduce the three tracks you'll be playing before we listen to them and chat about them?
Sure, yeah. It was actually really tough. I went back, I always use VGMDB as kind of my source to go through the past year of releases. And, there were a lot of big releases I didn't listen to this year. Like, I'm still waiting to listen to Tree of Savior, and which I'm sure would probably be somewhere near the top of my list if I was able to listen to it. But there's a lot of big games that I haven't been able to play yet. I haven't played Bloodborne yet, and that's on my list. So I was going through, and I was kind of unimpressed with a lot of what came out this year. So that's probably why the stuff I picked isn't well known. It's kind of obscure, and it just so happened to be that I really enjoyed this music, and they all are from RPGs, which I guess is kind of typical for me. But I was surprised that, I started looking into some of these games to see what they actually were. And they all are RPGs and are very fitting. So the first one is the battle theme for the Adele, I guess, portion of Imperial Saga. And, I really enjoyed that soundtrack all throughout. But I thought the Adele segment was kind of the one to go with. And then the second track that we're going to listen to is the Q Field from, I don't even know how you pronounce this game, Qrare? Qurare? Qurare. It's a Korean card battle RPG that is actually coming to PS4 soon. And so it has some Korean composers, SD and Knots, and a newcomer, Tak, and that's who wrote this one. And then the third one is from School Strikers, which was a CD that Square Enix put out last year that features music by, I have to look this up, some of the music is by Mitsudo Suzuki, so there's kind of that whole Final Fantasy 13 vibe to it, but also the rest of the music is done by a Kengo Tokusashi. So really good music, and it was hard just to pick one track, but I feel like this one kind of was the best of the bunch. So those are the three tracks that we're going to listen to.
Excellent. Well, then let's go ahead and start listening to them right now, and then we can share our thoughts. This sounds so much like the Saga music from Super Nintendo.
Yes, that was why I was so excited. And from the Wikipedia, announced in December 2014 as a 2015 release, the game is played in the user's internet browser and is a single player, but features a new story within the Saga setting. So yes, this is a browser-based Saga game. And so it sounds like there's 4 different scenarios, 4 different characters that you play as, and Adele is one of them. But it's cool because they have some of the, it's the same themes arranged over and over again through different characters' kind of lens.
Oh, neat.
So it's kind of like the rock one, which is Adele. There's the orchestral one, which is Heroes. There's like this really spooky, kind of creepy one. And then I can't really remember the last one. But so you hear the same themes arranged different ways. It's really cool. There's actually some Final Fantasy Tactics references in the orchestral set, which was composed by, who was it? It was Noriyuki Kamikura, who used to be at Bass Escape.
So that's Bass Escape, isn't it?
Yeah, so if you listen to, I think it's Advance Heroes, which is track 14 on the first album, there's actually there's like some notes that you'll recognize from Final Fantasy Tactics that I thought was really cool.
Yeah,
Buckhead
actually mentioned the hunt that you went on to try and find out whether or not those references were intentional, and if Sakimoto-san knew about it. It was a good little story.
Yeah. So, I do some work with Sakimoto-san. So I emailed him and said, hey, did you hear this? Did you know that they had done this? And his comment was like, yeah, they probably asked him to do that, kind of thing. But, yeah, it's really kind of interesting that they would go for that reference, or maybe he asked if he could. But the title makes me wonder what it's all about too. Advance, kind of like a tactical scenario kind of thing. I'm wondering. But yeah, so it's really cool because, the actual music is composed by Kenji Ito and Tsutomu Narita from Dog Year, and so it's great music all throughout, and then also really true to the Saga sound because you have Kenji Ito, who's coming off all these great rock arrange albums he's done for Saga. So some of the tracks that you'll hear sound like they would be right off of one of those rock albums.
Yeah, so, he must have been in that headspace, because I'm not super familiar with a lot of the old style Super Nintendo Saga music, but I know I've played a lot of the DLC and Curtain Call from the various sagas, and I hear this, and just the progression of the song and the way the melody is layered in there is just so consistent with what he's done in the past for it. I like that a lot.
Yeah, and going back and listening to this track that I picked, Battle Adele, which is track 4 on the first album, our first CD, it sounds exactly like, I was thinking kind of SNES, but it's actually more like PlayStation era, I think. It sounds very tastefully dated, back to that time where you're listening to, say, like a Wild Arms or a Beyond the Beyond kind of thing, I thought, when you're listening to this track. And so I was really just kind of enjoying that kind of retro vibe that they did without overdoing it. You don't really hear a whole lot of stuff going back to that era of gaming. Everybody's talking about 8-bit and 16-bit, so to go back to 32 is kind of cool.
Yeah, I always, whenever there are throwback games, I'm always like, man, can't you throw back to the era that I remember most vividly? Because not that I miss the Super Nintendo era, but there was just so much crazy, interesting music in the early PS1 days, and, obviously elsewhere too, but those days just had such a distinctive sound that's so hard to hear now, just because it was like we were still hanging on the edge of having those technical limitations where they were having to come up, or musicians were having to come up with creative ways to essentially express the sound they wanted.
Right.
I translated an interview recently with a composer who talked about that a lot too, and it was just really cool to get that perspective of even a lot of musicians are like, yeah, I had limitations, so it made me think creatively and challenged me as as a writer of music. And it made, once I had no limitations, it essentially changed my style for the better. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it seems like, we're getting a lot of 8-bit stuff, obviously. I think it's really hard to write, I guess, SNES style music because there's not really a set sound bank. It's sample based, but it's like, there's really strict limitations on the quality of the samples. So I think, Jake Kaufman has done he did an SNES soundtrack for like a Western RPG that he did. But it's supposedly, it's not like you can just load up FamiTracker for SNES and write some music. So going back to 16 bits where it's at for me, that's kind of like the golden age for me as a kid. I want to hear more of that, but it's just, I guess it's hard to replicate. So the PlayStation, it seems like you kind of have unlimited resources basically, except like space. So people used like crummy instruments, but were able to have, as many channels as they wanted, and those kinds of things. So yeah, I was really just excited about the soundtrack, and I know I never really played any of the Saga games, period. But I have listened to all the music. I listened to that soundtrack box they put out some years back, and it's all really good. So yeah, this was a nice treat.
Worth experiencing if you're not familiar with it, definitely. And so the second track you played, was the Q field from a game whose name I'm again going to butcher, but I'm going to call it Q Rare because that sounds cute to me.
Yeah.
Sounds cute rare. Wow, that one didn't work.
So have you guys covered this at all on RPGFan?
No.
I don't think we have. This is actually the first, when you pop the music in your list of picks, it was sort of the first time I had ever heard of it.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, people are, I guess, really excited about this game. And I think I know mostly about it because I do some work with SD and Knots. So that's why I was tempted not to pick it. But fortunately, the track I picked is not composed by them. But that's how I came to know it is through them. It's a Korean-made card battle RPG of some sort. And I guess there's been a lot of excitement about it because it's coming to PlayStation 4 and there's actually been some hype. But, I read a lot of Siliconera also. And so I think they've been writing about it an awful lot. And so listening to the soundtrack, I was actually it was difficult to pick between the second track on the album, which is the Q Field, that's the one we heard, and then track 11, which is the Q Battle, which is also really good. So I recommend checking out the soundtrack. And both tracks are actually by Tak, this new Korean composer that I don't know a whole lot about, and he doesn't have a link on VGMDB, so I can't really see what else he's done. But yeah, it's a Google Android game in Korea, and they're porting it over to PlayStation 4. I don't know if they're making a new one or what they're doing, but it sounds pretty interesting. And it's kind of right along the line of all the Korean RPG music that you'll hear. It's really well produced, electronic in style, a lot of synth bends, and kind of that kind of Ragnarok-esque. That's why I'm looking really forward to listening to Tree of Savior. But this will hold me over until then. So,
yeah, the sound of this is really interesting, and it's I know
Go
ahead, Caleb.
It's kind of like a trance sound almost.
Yeah.
With this track, which is really rad.
And it's interesting too. I actually was reading / translating an article recently on the Korean mass media scene and how it's sort of in the term they're using isn't a cultural renaissance, but because of measures taken by the government to sort of facilitate the production of artistic works like anime and video games and video game appreciation, there is apparently more Korean games making it elsewhere than ever before. And so, not that relates specifically to the music, but the uniqueness of this sound, of the Q field, just sort of reminded me of that article, because it really does have a sort of interesting trancey sound that almost, for some reason, reminds me of Phantasy Star Online Episode 3, Card Revolution. And I don't know if that's because it's a card game as well, and I just want to have that connection because no one loves that game enough.
Card games must have trance music.
Yes.
The soul of the card game.
But it's I don't know if it's wishful thinking on my part because I love that game, but I did really like this one too. And again, I must have just missed it coming because it does seem to be really popular. If you look up, I looked it up on Google Image Search, and half of it is people cosplaying the characters from the game. So it clearly is not a small thing.
Yeah. Here's a synopsis if anyone cares. Q-Rare Magic Library is set in the Library of Babel that contains all the knowledge in the universe. When the library is destroyed, 3 apprentices, librarian hopeful Miyu, former military specialist Delphin, and Sella, a girl from a privileged background, go off on a journey to reclaim the lost knowledge. The game is a card battling game with cooperative play and online raids. And that's from Siliconera, written in 2015. So sounds like they're basically developing a new PS4 version of their game that was on mobile. So that seems kind of an interesting route to take. But I'm looking forward to checking it out.
Sounds like a game that I have to play, being a librarian myself.
There you go.
Yeah, for sure.
Become the lost knowledge.
Librarian.
I wonder
the whole soundtrack is the whole soundtrack is really kind of this whole sound. So I think anyone who likes this track should look into the rest of it because it's all really good.
Yeah, I like it. It's trance and electronic, like you said, but it kind of has it's that, but it's also a little lighter. I'm not really a big fan of a lot of electronic stuff, but I like this one a lot. I think because it's not just that; it has some other aspects to it that were pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's bubbly. It's upbeat. Yeah, it's really good stuff, and it reminds me again of like all the Ragnarok and Granado Espada and all that stuff. So it's kind of what drew me to it.
Yeah.
But I think Korean development studios, I mean, they put the money into the music. They invest, and you can tell, when you hear it that they've done a good job on, writing the music, mixing it, mastering it, doing all the stuff. And then I just love Korean artwork too. All the kind of the spin that they have on the kind of Japanese anime style. It's kind of their own. They've kind of made it their own, and I really enjoy a lot of the art that comes with these games. So,
yeah, not K-pop, but Korean artwork is really interesting because, I know, if you're not probably as well versed in things like this as probably I would assume the four of us are, it can be confused for anime from Japan, but I have found that it has sort of a style on its own, and it usually is characterized by that sort of hyper detailed, really colorful artwork. And for me, it's really interesting to hear the music because, a few episodes ago, we played something from Magna Carta: Tears of Blood, which is a horrible video game, but a lot of people really liked it, and the music was so good. Not to generalize and say all Korean games have this similar sound, but I have found that the creative approach is just different by necessity of it just being, from a different place. So it's cool to sort of hear that different style of sound, because I think, and even I'm guilty of this, people sometimes forget that music comes from more than just, Europe and the US and Japan from games. So it's interesting to sort of get different cultural heritage represented.
For sure. And I think, I don't know. When you say cultural heritage, I almost think of ethnic music. But you listen to you go back and listen to Ragnarok Online. I think they were aiming for, kind of doing a diverse kind of set of music and featuring different instruments. But it just seems like a lot of the Korean game music that I enjoy is all this electronic music, and it seems like a lot of games feature that for some reason. I don't really know why, but it seems like there's a lot. If you go back and listen to Granado Espada or Ragnarok Online or any of these games, this soundtrack, for example, it's a lot of trance and techno and drum and bass, and I don't know why that is, but I guess maybe that's that kind of their let's make it exciting and hip,
energetic,
but it seems like that's kind of one of the big styles that's represented in a lot of these games that at least I've been listening to and playing. So,
well, that was a great one too. So your third track, this is from Schoolgirl Strikers, which I had sort of not heard of, but it was one of those things that I was unconsciously hearing because it's produced by Square Enix in Japan, and so I know I've seen it around, and so when I saw the artwork, I was like, oh, right. I do sort of have an inkling of what this is. And so I didn't know that it's Mitsuno Suzuki. It's also, I think you said Kengo Tokusashi, who did this song in particular.
Yes.
But so I actually listened to this whole soundtrack, and it's a really good one. It's, just because for me, having had no conscious awareness of the existence of this Schoolgirl Strikers thing, I was like, oh, what is this? Oh, it's Square Enix. How did I miss this? But this song in particular, I think we're calling it Begin the Emergency Mission. Yeah, that sounds rightish. I love the light sound that it has. It almost gives me a Chrono Crossy vibe.
Yeah, you kind of got that whole Celtic vibe, but just this really thick, deep, warm bass that I really just enjoy. It's kind of what sets it apart from a lot of other stuff. Because it's funny because Grand Blue, the song I picked from Grand Blue Fantasy last year was also a Celtic track. So when I picked this one, I was like, oh, it's kind of the same thing as last year. But I really enjoy the bass line in this one, and it's just upbeat and bubbly and exciting. And I actually just looked up Tokusashi on VGMDB. It looks like they collaborated on Lightning Returns. He was an arranger and performer
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, and also on 13.2.
Yeah, no
So
kidding.
it looks like that's where they're they've worked together before, so they did it again here. But yeah, I knew nothing. I knew nothing and still know nothing about this game or series, if it is a series. But it looks like it is a card collecting mobile game with JRPG and visual novel influences. And it's funny because I'll listen to some of these soundtracks from Square Enix and really like fall in love with the music and never play the game, and then go back years later and say like, you know what, I've been enjoying this soundtrack for a really long time. What's the deal? And I'll go back and play the game. Like Nier was one of those games. I listened to the soundtrack first. I loved the soundtrack. I didn't play it until 2 years after the game came out. So I think this is kind of, if you listen to the soundtrack, it's really diverse. There's kind of like darker tracks. There's orchestral ones. There's a nice Christmas remix on there. This one kind of jumped out as me as kind of the most. Maybe that's kind of a, well, I guess I picked a battle theme first, but I guess I tend to like the really upbeat, upply songs. So I guess maybe that's just my personal preference.
Yeah, no, I like it as well. I mean, especially we were joking before the show that it's 1 a.m. here in Japan, and I'm struggling to stay awake, not because of any reason other than that I'm old now and have to go to sleep early. But this
the old man, you.
No, this is like, I have like my second wind thanks to this. It's it's interesting that it's called Begin the Emergency Mission though, because it's so light.
Laid back.
Like, wow, this is a chill emergency, yo.
Yeah, my notes are literally, this is the most laid-back emergency mission I've ever heard, and also the most Celtic/Riverdance emergency mission I've ever heard, which is a good thing.
Yeah, it's really weird. I wonder, what the context is. Maybe, they're up late and somebody has to go downstairs and get like a midnight snack or something, or, what is the playful nature of this emergency mission? It doesn't sound like it's overly serious. So again, not knowing much about the series, but just, I actually pulled up the website, I'm looking at it now, and there's just kind of a slider of different photos from the series. It looks lighthearted and upbeat, and but yeah, I mean, you look at the title, you're like, okay, I would not have guessed that was what it was called. I would have figured this was called like Exciting Day in the Sun or something, but okay.
Well, contrary to everyone else's expectations, the battle theme is death metal, so that's where they get you.
It is a very diverse soundtrack, so there's something for everyone.
Excellent.
Yeah, it sounds. It actually sounds a lot like something I would hear in a Gust game.
Yes,
I think
you're right.
Yeah, that light, airy.
Like Team Gust.
Yeah, I love that. I love all of their music so much, and that's what it sounds like. I think that's why I like it so much.
It seems kind of strange, but if I was going to qualify it with like a single phrase, it would be watercolor, even though obviously this is music, but I do feel like this is like, I get sort of, it makes me think of Threads of Fate. I don't know why, but Threads of Fate I feel like had a light sound like this too, which in my mind is a compliment because I love that soundtrack. But
well, I mean, I really, you said you listened to the whole thing, Stephen, but I suggest everybody to go check it out and listen to the whole thing, and really well produced, and again, a lot of diversity in what you're going to hear. So it was really hard to pick a song, but I guess I just went for the upbeat, bubbly, exciting, happy thing. So, but yeah, it's a really good soundtrack all throughout.
It's a great one to end on.
Yeah.
Well.
No, don't fall asleep now.
I think
you don't want it to end.
No, well, it's we got through it, so we talked about everything so quickly, and I was like, wow, it just seems like a shame to be ending so quickly. We have to have you on the show more often, Jason. We'll have to have you on a regular episode,
yes.
So you can enjoy our 2-hour recording sessions with us. Just so we can talk at greater length about something. I'll have to think of a topic that would be fun for you.
I think we're all a little, it's 8:30 here on the Pacific Coast, and on a weekend I usually wouldn't be up this early. I think we were all talking about that before the recording started, but so I think, even though you're falling asleep because you're up late, I think we're all kind of just zombied out from being up early. But yeah, I'm just trying to be polite to you, Stephen, because I know you need to get to bed, so I was trying not to be too long-winded in the discussion.
Oh well, not at all. Like I said, once we started going, it was good conversation and good music.
But were you guys surprised? I mean, I look back. I actually had written somewhere about all the stuff I didn't get to listen to this year. It's not an RPG, but I haven't been able to listen to like the Halo 5 soundtrack. I didn't get to listen to the Bloodborne soundtrack, which I'm kind of waiting to play the game. I'm playing through Dragon Quest Heroes right now, and after I finish that, it's going to be Bloodborne. But I feel like there's a bunch of stuff I didn't get to listen to. Were you guys kind of underwhelmed with a lot of the stuff that came out this year? Oh, Xenoblade Chronicles X is another game I haven't played yet. And
underwhelming cannot be associated with that game.
She's a big fan of Xeno.
Me too.
I like the game. I love the soundtrack. It's different. It's very different from Xenoblade Chronicles Shulk Edition. It's Salbato, so it's his style. But I definitely think it works well in that game. I thought there was just a stupid amount of great music this year, but sort of by necessity of us, running RPG Fan Music and doing the music podcast now frequently thanks to Caitlin and Mike, I sort of end up listening to stuff a lot because it's like, oh well, I have to sit here and translate or sit here and do work for 5 hours, so I'm gonna find lots of new music to listen to. And I actually heard a lot of really interesting stuff this year. I'm obviously way too obsessed with the Undertale soundtrack right now because that's some outstanding stuff there. And then of course, somehow in 3 or 4 months of existing, that game has inspired as many remixes as Chrono Trigger. So if one wanted to listen to Undertale alone forever, I think you probably could. But I mean, between that, the Xenoblade soundtrack was great. I absolutely love Silken's work on Heavensward. I'm sure Mike. I'm basically reading Mike and Caitlin's list as well.
Yeah, so that's something I haven't listened to yet either. I had made a little list: Bloodborne, Metal Gear, Halo 5, Xenoblade Chronicles X, Undertale, and Final Fantasy 14. I've listened to like the CD releases, but I've listened to the digital stuff, and they've been releasing all the Heavensward stuff digitally, so I haven't listened to it
yet. Not to plug,
Mm.
but the full soundtrack is coming out next month, so on Blu-ray. So,
well, I'll hear it then.
Yes, I can't wait.
So that'll be my favorite of 2016.
Yeah, hopefully.
Mike and I will feature it next year, Music of the Year for sure.
Yeah, episode dedicated just to that.
Oh, we could.
Yes.
I have nothing but praise for Silken's work on that series. I mean, I really, really liked the Realm Reborn soundtrack. It had that distinction of being like, we have to rebuild this game. So there was your usual spate of RPG tracks in terms of like different, cutscene tracks and, the forest area, the nighttime songs. But with Heavensward, this is the first time that team has sort of gotten to take a crack at the Final Fantasy XIV world without any pre-existing stuff to deal with. So it's like there's like 4 or 5 main themes in that soundtrack that just get worked into every dungeon, every battle, cutscenes, characters. So like it's so the connective tissue between one song and the other is so exciting. So by the time you're near the end of that game / soundtrack, you're hearing this, the final boss track, and it's like just all these themes put together. I have a lot of good stuff to say about that one too.
Yeah, it's just kind of like out of nowhere though. Like Silken has not written a whole lot of music, and so for him to take the helm of Final Fantasy XIV and do such an amazing job, people are just like, what the heck? Who's this guy?
I think that's pretty much true of like the game in general. Because Yoshida produces it, and I think he worked on Dragon Quest X or Dragon Quest something before. Like nothing really big. Like he wasn't like a name that like people really knew, like most Final Fantasy people, until this game.
So I didn't Koichi Sugiyama do Final Fantasy XIV? Wouldn't that have been something?
That would have been interesting. And unexpected. Did he do? He did Dragon Quest X, didn't he? The MMO, yeah.
Yeah, he's doing Dragon Quest XI. He's the one that basically said that it's being made.
Oh yeah, I remember that. He accidentally gave it.
Yeah.
We're totally not making this.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it.
Oh, I'm excited about that. It's gonna be really cool.
I'm not huge on the series. I plan on giving 8 another shot, and I'm actually pretty excited for 7 on 3DS now that they're getting it out in English. I've heard a lot of good things about that one. Man, 11 looks cool.
It does. Man, I'm gonna play the 16-bit version.
Oh yeah, that's right, because it's got the 2 versions. I love that.
Yeah, the 3D. Well, there's like 3 versions really then, because there's the high-res PS4 version, the kind of blocky, PlayStation era, but cel-shaded graphics 3DS top screen version, and then the 16-bit 3DS bottom screen version.
Oh, that's right. What a cool idea.
Yeah. All right. Well, you need to sleep.
Well, thank you so much for being on Music of the Year, Jayson. Again, we'll have to steal some of your time later this year on a topic. So if you can think of something you'd like to talk about, some interesting topic for music, do let us know. We should have you back on in a longer format.
We might have some RPG music coming out on Scarlet Moon Records, so maybe that's something to talk about. We're just wrapping up Unraveled. Tale of the Shipbreaker's Daughter, which is a soundtrack that's Hiroki Kikuta and Dale North are collaborating on. And so it's sounding awesome, and I can't wait for people to hear it.
Oh, yeah, I'm excited to hear that. That's such an interesting concept for a game, too, so I don't want to keep you all day talking about it, but I'm looking forward to hearing that as well, so you should totally keep us abreast of that.
Will do. Thank you guys for having me. I had a great time.
Yeah,
thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
And of course, Mike and Caitlin, thank you for getting up early on the weekend as well. And everybody, keep on listening, because Music of the Year soldiers onward, sleepy host and all.
Okay, welcome back to our next segment in our awesome Music of the Year extravaganza. Mike and I are joined for this awesome segment by longtime friends of the show, Matt Cunningham from RPGamer.
Greetings.
And Don Kotowski from VGMOnline.
Hi, how's everyone doing today?
I think we're all good, right?
I'm fantastic. I don't know about you all.
Well, I'm much better than I was like 5 hours ago, so that's a plus.
That's the truth.
So thank you, both of you guys, for joining us, because it's basically now a Music of the Year tradition that we have you guys on as guests at some point during our Music of the Year extravaganza. I keep using that word because it's true. It really is an extravaganza of music. So let's just get right into it with our very first block. And let's see, I think, Mac, you have our first pick.
Oh, yes. The first pick for me this year is Silver... as I trip over words, just like everybody else, is Silver Will Golden Wings, the game opening version from the Legends of Heroes Trails in the Sky SC.
I love this track. I love the song, too. All versions of it are good.
Oh, yes. This one was... It was hard to pick one of these versions, but this one was the one that I preferred.
Awesome. And then, Don, what did you pick?
I chose The Forgotten Capital from Etrian Mystery Dungeon. It's a classic tune from the Etrian Odyssey series, redone by another composer at Koshiro's company, who has taken more of an arranging role in the modern remakes of the early games in the Etrian Odyssey series.
All right, awesome. So let's take a listen to Silver Will Golden Wings, the game opening version from Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky, second chapter, and The Forgotten Capital from Etrian Mystery Dungeon.
I
Yes, so the pick that I mentioned earlier, Silver Will Golden Wings, if I say it slower, it works so much better. There's a lot of versions that I could have chosen for this one, and a lot of great remixes of this. It was hard to really pick just one because it seems like they've done lots of arrangements of it. There's a great instrumental arrangement in the Kiseki Super Arrange album that I wanted to pick, but I chose the original, the game opening version, because there's just something about this. Trails SC just really hit home perfectly for me this year, and I think it just brought back a whole lot of nostalgia. And this opening track, from where it just kind of whooshes in at the start, goes whoosh, and then that second of a rest right before it starts into the cool violin sound. And I'm not good at instrumentation, so forgive me if I'm totally not nailing what instrument it is, but it sure sounds like violin. This is Falcom after all, and they tend to have like rocking violin sounds, even if it's not actually violins. But just how it changes and just builds up to that first start, and hearing that during the opening part of the game, when it's starting that opening intro, it just flashed me back to what I loved about the first game, what I love about RPGs in general, and just the whole nostalgic factor of JRPGs. Just hearing that right at the start, breaking into the music, it reminded me of like old school like Lunar back in the day. Some of the better, like the cheesy fighting through the darkness that I absolutely love from the original Sega CD Lunar. That's what this kind of reminded me of, minus the cheesiness. It was just that strong, perfect start to a game. And it also flashes you back, like I said, to the first game, the first chapter, where it was just Silver Will, and there was a big fight between Lieutenant Lawrence and Agate back at the very start of that. And just everything about this, it was just a nostalgic filled track for me. And I love just the vocals. I wanted to pick this one because I do love the Japanese vocals, and it just flows so perfectly. This is one of my favorite openings, if not an all-time favorite track of all-time favorite of all time, if that that's a thing, right?
It's totally a thing.
Sure.
Yeah. No, that's great. I love this opening too, because I got introduced to the Kiseki games and the music, I think, through this podcast. We played the arranged version of Silver Will from second chapter way back when, and I thought it was really awesome and loved it. And I was surprised that it was a boss theme from the first chapter, and then I was even more surprised that there was a vocal version and that it was the opening of second chapter. And I thought that was so cool to bring back that theme and to showcase it right at the start of the game.
Just a motif. It just builds on everything, doesn't it? That was the great part about it for me, because hearing that when I first started SC just set the whole mood.
Definitely, yeah. The only thing, I wish that those openings would repeat. Like, it's great that you have them once, but Falcom, please let them. They should play whenever you boot up the game, which thankfully they seems to have started doing with Trails of Cold Steel. But I want to hear this song every time I boot up the game.
So I played it on PSP, so I never actually went back to the title screen or the intro screen again. So it was just the first time it started up that I actually heard it in game. But it's still good for me. Sleep mode for the win.
Yeah, I love the beginning of that a lot too. I really like, well, any song that has that kind of like slow build up, especially when you have a violin like that. And I don't know either. I'm just going to say it's a violin. I'm sure it is.
I'm pretty sure it is a violin.
Yeah. And the best part too, like I said, the vocal version of this is what I really enjoy, because it seems like everything just constantly builds throughout the song. And like I said, the opening swoosh going into that, and then the violin, and then you have kind of the background vocals just slowly building into it until the actual lyrics start. And just absolutely love it. I'm so glad when like Japanese games come over and they keep the original Japanese intro. It's rare these days that we see things swapped out. And, there were some good ones back in the day, or at least cheesy good ones from the working design days that I really liked. But I don't care if it's in another language, if people don't think it's going to do as well. I think it really works, and it just kind of keeps things natural. I really love that. And no, I'm not taking a stab at Leona Lewis and Final Fantasy 13. Oh, wait, maybe I am.
Maybe you are. I think it's definitely more accepted now, especially. I mean, the companies that bring out these games now, you have Xseed and Atlas and NIS, the kind of games they bring out and the market they bring them out for, I think a pretty large percentage of those fans want the original. So, they don't need to go through and redub it, unless there's, licensing issues, I guess, but...
Yeah, and that tends to be very rare. They tend to keep things as, traditional, or not as traditional, but as standard as possible. The most natural translation of a game and the most natural experience from the Japanese version. I really appreciate that, because I think it works, especially with this track. And like I said, if you haven't listened to this track, listeners, listen to every version of it. There's so many out there. Like I said, there's multiple versions of it just within the Trails SC soundtrack itself. So listen to all of those. Find the Kiseki FC SC Super Arranged version. Listen to that. The instrumental one there. It's great. Just every one of them. Go through there and listen to it, because it never gets old for me. Team Agate.
Well, moving on then, let's talk about the Forgotten Capital. And Don, I don't know much about the Atrium games besides that they have awesome music, and this was a really awesome piece as well. So tell us a little bit about it.
Okay, well, I'm going to get the year wrong because I didn't look up ahead of time, but I want to say 2006 or 7, maybe? I want to say, maybe, or after that, I'm not quite sure, but the Etrian Odyssey series first made its debut in Japan, and it was a homage to the old school first-person RPGs back in the day, like Wizardry and the like. And who else should compose such a retro soundtrack than Yuzo Koshiro, who's been around since the 80s, doing what he does best with his FM synthesis style music. However, as the years progressed, some of the games were remade for the 3DS, and even the new ones for the 3DS moved to a more live instrument style. And the Etrian Mystery Dungeon, which was a collaboration that shocked everyone because it was leaked by some retailer before anything, for a U.S. release, before even Atlas had announced it. And so I was expecting some old music and some new music. It's mostly music from the first 4 games, arranged by both Koshiro himself and then another composer, Takeshi Yanagawa, who works at Ancient alongside Yuzo Koshiro. And he decided to tackle many tunes that Koshiro himself already arranged for the 3DS remakes of the first 2 games in the series. So his version of Forgotten Capital was not something that I expected at all, because when you first hear it open, it's like this very angelic, kind of calm tune that doesn't hint at the original melody at all until 45 seconds, when that string comes in and just starts subtly playing the main melody, and then it just flares up into this regal and dramatic fanfare. And it's just probably my favorite version of this theme, and it's been done in the original FM version, the remake by Koshiro, and then also on a few Arrange albums when they were released back in the day. So it's just one of these tunes that I think is great because it's such a strong original, but because he also took it in a direction I wasn't expecting.
Yeah, I definitely got that sense myself, not even, knowing the original music. It's like you said, the way it starts off, you thinking it's going to go one way, but then it kind of slides sideways a little bit. And that was very cool. And it had almost kind of kind of a military waltz feel to it, with the pacing once the sort of the beat comes in, and you have some brass and percussion bursts that jump in every once in a while. It was kind of making me imagine like a royalty or a nobility having kind of like a ball or something or whatnot. And I would say it's having no idea what the imagery is or what you're doing there, but it was kind of evocative in that sense, and that was a cool kind of thing.
I'm not sure how it's used in this game because I didn't make it that far. I know it's in one of the later dungeons, but no, I don't want to spoil it for people who are maybe just getting into the series and playing the Millennium Girl remake, but it is definitely not what I would expect from that track, knowing the setting that it originally plays in. If that makes sense.
That seems to be about par for the course with a lot of the Etrian games. They tend to, like, some of my favorite tracks from those, I haven't played the games, but I'll listen to them and look at the title and it will say like Labyrinth number 4, and it's just, that you're in there and you're going to be fighting a lot of stuff, but it's such a peaceful or a calm theme, or just a pretty lovely theme, or in this case kind of a, like you said, a militaristic or a royal theme's what it sounded like, just like you said, Caitlin.
Well, the reason that the series' music, at least for the first 2 games especially, are so peaceful for the dungeon themes is because the entire game takes place inside a tree. So the first, in the first game, the first dungeon is a very just peaceful forest looking, and then it moves on to more like a jungle, and then it gets to like a rainforest, and then like a desert forest, and then this one, but I'm not going to say what that is because it's a big spoiler.
You're saying you want to keep the mystery.
I want to keep the mystery
of Etrian Mystery
Dungeon.
I mean,
yes, of Etrian Mystery Dungeon, but I'm not quite sure if it is the design of the dungeon it's used in is reflective of how the original tune is used. But I imagine there's probably some influence there.
Mike, did you have any thoughts?
Don't put me on the spot like that.
That's my job, is to put you on the spot.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I liked it a lot. I didn't know. Don told us off air, but I like that this game has a lot of arrangements from earlier games in the series. Not that I'm really familiar with the other ones either, but I do like this one. And it's for what's, did we call it a dungeon crawler? I guess so. But for what's a dungeon crawler, I wouldn't have expected something so peaceful as this track.
Yeah, Etrian Mystery Dungeon's a weird mashup game as is, so it tends to be unusual. Are all of the tracks within the soundtrack that you've heard just remixes of the original Etrian games, or is there anything original?
No, there is a lot of original music. Most of the dungeon music is remakes. Like, I know they have a new town theme, a new opening theme, and some event themes and stuff that are new. I want to say 25% roughly is probably new music.
Okay.
And 75% is remixes or of the first 4 games.
Gotcha. I didn't know. I know Mystery Dungeon is really just a thing. It isn't, there's plenty of Mystery Dungeon type games, and I haven't followed any of their soundtracks other than this one, so I wasn't sure what kind of ties it has. It seems way deeper into the Etrian side of things than it does any of the other Mystery Dungeons. Yeah,
I think the only thing that really ties into the Mystery Dungeon side of things is that while all of the classes are based off of existing Etrian classes that you pick when you make your party, they have a new Wanderer class, because I guess Sheeran the Wanderer was what kind of popularized the Mystery Dungeon series. So they added a Wanderer class that kind of can create shortcuts throughout the dungeon, so you don't have to backtrack it as much.
I did enjoy what I played of it until it got to be too tedious. I know we talked about that a little bit before, but it's a fun concept that I think could use some tweaking. And if that meant we got another one with more music, I would be down for that.
Well, speaking of fun and music, why don't we head on to our next block, in which I believe, Don, you had the first pick?
Yes, and I chose a tune called Sherlock Holmes, the Great Detective of the Foggy Town, from the Great Ace Attorney. It obviously hasn't been announced for localization in the United States, but if you go by the Japanese name, Daikuten Saiban,
it's a Daikuten Saiban Naruhodo Ryunosuke no Boken, which is like you said, the Great Ace Attorney, the adventures of Ryunosuke Naruhodo, in which I'm hoping, or I'm assuming, that Naruhodo as the last name is an intentional nod to the phrase Naruhodo, which would make total sense for an Ace Attorney game. So
I'm sure it is, because even in the other tunes of the soundtrack that I didn't choose, they do give a nod to the Ace Attorney series with some musical references as well.
All right, and then Mac, you have our next pick.
Yes, it was an unusual music year for me, some of the ones that I liked, and this was one of the better soundtracks. So I chose Artemis from Lord of Magna, Made in Heaven, and for reasons to which I hope Caitlin will appreciate when I talk about it.
Ooh, I can't wait. So let's take a listen to, here's another very long title, Sherlock Holmes, the Great Detective of the Foggy Town, from the Great Ace Attorney, The Adventures of Ryunosuke Naruhodo, and Artemis from Lord of Magna.
So that was the Sherlock Holmes, the great detective of Foggy Town from the Great Ace Attorney. And the reason I chose that one is because I really like I get a very European sense of it, which is not something that you would typically find in an Ace Attorney game, at least in my experiences. And the fact that it also reminds me of Professor Layton a little bit. And the reason I say that is because the same composer, whose name is Yasumasa Kitagawa, composed the Professor Layton and Ace Attorney crossover game. So I think some of that style carries through. And plus, I mean, how often does Sherlock Holmes get such an awesome theme in a Japanese-made video game?
I'm thinking not often.
I'm thinking it should happen more often, because this is a really fun piece of music to listen to. And
yeah, I really like the... Oh, sorry.
Well, I was going to say that you mentioning how it sounds European, that's sort of how I feel. Like, I actually wrote down that it kind of reminds me of other representations of Sherlock Holmes that I've heard in popular media, like in movies and TV shows and whatnot. With the instrumentation, you've got some strings, some accordion. It's got a fast sort of pounding movement to it. So that was a really cool thing to have a little bit of a recognition there. This sounds like something you might associate with Sherlock Holmes or with mystery detective stories in London and whatnot. So that was cool to have that there as a sort of an oral or a sonic sort of theme.
Oh yeah, definitely. And there are a lot more, especially of the European characters whose tracks are just stellar, but I had to choose one, so. But they're all very much in that style and something that you would expect of, industrial age, London. That's how I guess I would describe it.
Well, we were talking over the break about what's going on in this game, and Mike, you were mentioning sort of what the premise kind of is. It's a prequel to the rest of the Ace Attorney series, isn't it?
Right. I mean, I don't know firsthand because we have no idea if this game's going to come out in English, but since I don't know if Steven's talked about it on here, but he might have maybe kind of played through like 5 of the games in the last couple months. He just discovered the series all of a sudden and maybe also made me buy it. And
me too.
Yeah. But my understanding is that it's an ancestor of Phoenix Wright, and then he teams up with Sherlock Holmes in London. So
that sounds really so cool. Awesome.
Yeah. So I don't know if there's any chance it's going to come out here. I think they might have said it by now, but I'll keep my fingers crossed because I just love the idea of that.
Who wouldn't want to team up with Sherlock Holmes?
No kidding. Except Watson most of the time, because he usually gets the short end of the stick on most things.
And in this game, Watson is a female. I know that much.
Oh, cool.
Oh.
Just like Elementary.
I was just going to say, yeah. Which I thought was a nice twist.
Is she played by Lucy Liu in this game?
What was that?
Is she played by Lucy Liu in this game, like on the Elementary TV show? Of course not, but would have been nice.
That would be cool, yes. Well, speaking of cool, Mac, your pick has got a really cool beat to it, like right off the bat.
Yes. Something about the Lord of Magna's soundtrack it caught me off guard because I wasn't expecting anything really special from it, and I wasn't familiar with the composer, at least not by name, and I don't think I've looked up super specifically what else they've worked on. Morita?
I did.
Tell me.
Like 20 minutes
anything
ago.
that stood out? I was about to say, I thought I remembered looking up and seeing some of the later Shining Force games, possibly, if I'm remembering correctly, but I can't remember what else.
I think I saw that she did like Shining Force Neo.
Okay.
But it looks like most of the stuff she's worked on has been the Rune Factory series.
Okay, and I guess with it being Marvelous that's working on this one, that would make sense. But the reason I picked this track from the soundtrack is because a lot of these tracks on the Lord of Magna soundtrack, but especially this one, kind of reminded me of Falcom. Just something that the Falcom sound team would put out. It reminds me like of an Ys battle, or not, yeah, an Ys fight scene, or one of my favorite Ys tracks is Ancient Land from Ys Celceta.
Yes.
And it reminds me of that feel that you get. It's just one of those, and I agree, on the soundtrack CD that you get, it's such a short sample of this track, but when it plays in game, it loops really well. How well it loops reminds me of, I keep bringing back Lunar for some reason, but Second Overworld from Lunar Silver Star, how it just and if you loop that track, it just and continues on, and enjoy my musical interpretation, which is awful, but still, if you've ever heard that, you know what I'm talking about. It just works so well, and it's so action-packed, which is just perfect for this game. Despite the fact there's a lot of talking, the music really helps you ignore some of the slower parts. So I enjoyed Lord of Magna for what it was, but the music really is what kind of set it out for me and made it something that I'll actually remember from this year. And it just sounded very Falcom, which is the best compliment I can give it.
Yeah, this reminded me a lot of something, like a specific track that I've heard, and I couldn't put my finger on it, but you mentioning Falcom, I think that narrows it down, because it does have that sort of Falcom sound to it, especially with the use of the strings throughout. I love the chunk, like around 30 seconds in, when the strings are just kind of going crazy, dancing up and up and up and up. It's really a cool part. So I'm wondering, is the rest of the soundtrack this sort of fast-paced and energetic? Because this is really awesome.
It's not necessarily as fast-paced, but so much of this soundtrack really does remind me of Falcom. There's one on there called The Decisive Battle, another great one, which of course is a later boss battle, but it's just got so much energy to it and so much tension to it. Even the standard encounter, which I guess I'm trying to remember in game, but from the title, you would imagine it would be just a random battle that you're fighting, one of the non-boss battles called Encounter. Even that one just has some good build-up. It's just got some low tension that just kind of builds throughout. This soundtrack completely caught me off guard because every bit of it was just really, really solid. And Artemis is the one that reminded me the most of a Falcom game. It reminded me of Ys, or maybe one of the Kaseki battles, or even like Silver Will, Golden Wings. It kind of reminded me of that at some points too. But yeah, the entire soundtrack is good, and I highly recommend just checking out everything from it.
It's really interesting where you can find music as good as this. The next part of the podcast that no one has heard yet, if you're listening to this, but I picked a song like that too, from a sort of adult-oriented visual novel. Not that I played the game, but I knew the composer, and I won't get into the details. No,
wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
It's the Well, I'll talk about it later, but I looked at the game, and I know, like, I will never play this game, and I was so surprised at how good the music was. Not at all like this, very different, but it's not where I would expect to have heard that kind of music. Same with this. Like, I don't really know much about Lord of Magna, but I'm probably not going to play it anytime soon. But I had no idea, because I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to it, so I would not have thought that there'd be music like this in there. So, of course, now I gotta check out the rest. Yeah, very, very cool song.
That's what we do best on this show, is we play awesome music that makes you want to listen to more.
Yes, you cost us all a lot of money. Or we cost... How's that work? We're costing ourselves.
We cost ourselves?
Yeah.
Well, it's the price we pay for having lots of fun talking about awesome video game music. And
there could be worse things in life, that's for sure.
Yes. Well, okay, speaking of awesome music, we still have one more block left in this segment. And Mac, I think you had the first pick.
Yes, I finally get to heap some praise upon Takeharu Ishimoto, which I've been like pushing you all for years and years and years. And I say years and years, it's probably only been a year or two to do like a full Ishimoto podcast. And it needs to happen because I love the man. His music is just my favorite. He's become one of my favorite composers. So when we finally got Final Fantasy Type 0 coming out, the HD version in 2015, how could I not pick one of the tracks from that album? And it was near impossible to narrow them down. And there were two that I was really, really debating between, and two very similar tracks for that reason. But I went with Rem Tokimiya as my pick, and I will talk more in detail about it in just a bit.
All right, awesome. And then, Don, you have the last pick of the segment. What did you pick?
I chose a track from Tales of Zestiria, which, on average, I would say is an average Tales game, but in terms of the overall soundtrack, I would say is above average, both for the composer that typically composes for the series, Motoi Sakuraba, but also because it features music from Goshina, who composed the oft-forgotten Tales of Legendia, but his music is never forgotten from that game, I don't think, because since it was the 20th anniversary, they got the two most requested composers for the series to compose the soundtrack, and I'll talk more about the track I chose, which is called Testing the Passionate Bonds, after you listen.
All right. Well, let's listen to Rem Tokimiya from Final Fantasy Type 0 HD and Testing the Passionate Bonds from Tales of Zestiria.
All right. My favorite new composer, and we've talked, there could be dissension in this track, and that's okay because I welcome it. Rim Tokimiya, and the other track that I was debating between was Machina's theme, and I forget what his last name is at this point, but it doesn't really matter. I love Ishimoto, and one of the things that I do like is how he tends to get a play on a theme for a game and reuses it throughout in different styles. And Rim Tokimiya is just one of my favorite renditions of that. I love the little sweet piano theme where it starts. It's just kind of calm with an underlay of kind of feels like maybe violin, but it's just kind of a string feel underneath. And I just really like how it builds and builds and builds. And I've kind of used this as my like wake up ringtone, not really ringtone, but alarm for the last little bit, because it's got a nice calm feel there at the beginning, and it builds, becomes something stronger, and then goes into just such a melodic theme that I just love the guitar sound that kicks in. I'm a huge Ishimoto fanboy and make no excuses for it, none whatsoever, and have just loved that style. And it was a hard choice, like I said, between this and doing Machina's theme for this, because the only reason I didn't pick Machina's theme was because I enjoy the original Type 0 version, not the HD version of it, much better. Much, much better. It's kind of lacking some of the underlying musical themes in the HD version that the original had, but I think that Rim's theme holds up really well in this HD re-release, and it doesn't lose as much of the integrity. If you've played Type 0, and this is where I'm going to get on my soapbox for just a little bit, I want to know, and I haven't looked into this, so I could, I'm just lazy and haven't. I want to know who was the sound director for Final Fantasy Type 0, because they take one of my favorite soundtracks of the past few years, and then they reuse some of the most obnoxious tracks over and over and over. They take some of the most beautiful music from the game and play like a 10-second sample of it at certain key points that you can't control the dialogue, so you can't just not progress the dialogue and actually listen to it. You only get tiny chunks of the best music when you're actually playing the game. So I want to know who the sound director was. If it was Ishimoto, then he needs to be smacked. I don't think it was him. But whoever it was that decided, I'm going to take this great soundtrack and just chop it up and not let people hear the best parts of it, it just breaks my heart, because I love the soundtrack just to the ends of the earth. And I was a big Crisis Core fan as well, and I enjoyed pretty much all of that soundtrack with the exception of some of the more repetitive battle themes. There's a lot of good in with the bad in that one, but the good really outweighs the bad in my mind. But I feel like the public has only really heard some of the more annoying Type 0 and Crisis Core tracks, and it's such a heartbreaking thing. If you liked this one at all, if you liked Rim Tokimiya, if you like that theme whatsoever, look up the original one, the non-HD version. Look up Machina's original piece. Look up Machina and Rim. That's the title of it, Machina and Rim. Such a beautiful. Look up the arranged version. There's I can't remember if that's specifically what it's called, but I think it's the Rim's arranged version and Machina's arranged version, also part of the soundtrack. They're just such beautiful music. I just can't stop gushing, so I better stop gushing and let you all talk, because I could just go on and just ramble and gush forever, and somebody needs to stop this flow of gushing, so please do. And that sounds like a medical condition that somebody needs to have looked at.
Oh, we need to call a doctor? Well,
no, I can step in now, or you can step in now, it's fine, either one.
Well,
Well, if we want to control the gushing, we could let Don step in.
Yeah, Don could definitely.
No, I mean, it's not going to be. I'm not going to gush. I will say that of the Ishimoto tracks of this game, this is one of the better ones I enjoy, and I do think that Type 0 is his best effort to date. Yeah. If I were to have chosen a Type 0 track, I personally really like the Fires of Suzaku. That's probably my favorite.
I feel like that's probably a favorite of most people. It's one that more people have heard, or at least will reference. So I can understand that. I like his more calm tracks, though, on this CD. Or on this album.
There's also some of the I don't know what the English titles, like one of the opening tunes, like We Will Overcome or something like that. It's like the second or third track on the soundtrack. It also uses the same theme. It's, the main theme in some variation. I can look it up at some point, but I can't think of it offhand.
That's all right. They do all tend to have similar themes to it. But yeah, oh man, the soundtrack. Quick primer. I'll just go ahead and spit some out, just because you know what? You've given me an opportunity to get on a soapbox. Dadgummit, I'm going to take it. If you did like it at all, like I said, those that I mentioned already, listen to also Servant of the Crystal. I really enjoy that one. And yeah, I'm just drawing a blank for the actual names, just like you are. I know them when I hear them, but the titles of these are eluding me for whatever reason. I'll stop gushing now, sorry.
Well, what I really love about the entire Final Fantasy series is we've had a lot of different composers over the years between the main entries and the spin-offs, the side entries, if you will, and I love that they all have a distinctive sound to them. I mean, different composers, they should have a distinctive sound, but we've had a lot of different styles over the years in Final Fantasy, and love him or hate him, I really think that Ishimoto is one of the most distinctive of the Final Fantasy composers that we've had. I would say it's sort of like, this is like rock Final Fantasy. He loves to use a lot of, sort of some metal influences, but also just having sort of a nice guitar beat present in a lot of his tracks, and that's kind of cool to have that. Sometimes it can be a little overwhelming. I would agree with you. I prefer the original version, the non-HD version of the soundtrack. Some of the tracks in the HD version are a little almost too overwhelming with how they've been mixed and whatnot. But there are some really interesting tracks throughout both versions. He does an interesting thing with melody, and it's not the expected melodic tune that you might have heard from in years past in Final Fantasy, which I appreciate the unexpected, especially when it comes to a series as long-standing as Final Fantasy. You kind of have to have a little surprise and unexpected to keep things interesting and fresh.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I do like that the series has a distinct musical sound throughout its various games. That's one of the nicer things about the series, even if the music isn't always the greatest. And that goes across, the entire series. There's always tunes that make me wonder why the heck that was even greenlit, like Jose Temple. But
Crazy Chocobo, anyone?
Hey,
yeah.
Please.
I've grown to like Crazy Chocobo for some reason.
But
it's because you think you can ride that chocobo, right, Mike?
I can ride that chocobo.
You're getting me all hot and bothered, guys. But, just kidding. But even as much as we at Game Music Online aren't the greatest fans of Ishimoto, and this is a little plug, we did do a little mini interview with him earlier this year after he released Type 0 HD, so feel free to head over to our site and take a look at it if you want.
And I do. And I think I might have read it, but I'm going to read it again.
There's a song, I don't even know how old it is now, but I've been listening to Overclock Remix since it was Orange. Whatever year that was, since the site was this bright, blinding orange color. So for a long time, back when every track on the site was in one single drop-down, which I don't think they can get away with doing that now.
Well, that's a long time ago.
Long time, yeah. But one of my oldest tracks, I'm not sure how old it is or even who did it, but there was a remix of Terra's theme from 6. And it actually sounds a lot like this one. It was kind of a guitar, but it was really... It had the same really heavy bass, slow pace. So it's really dramatic, but it's still like slow, and I like that a lot. But I don't know. I'll find it if it's even still available. It was called Terra in Black. But great remix, and this sounds a lot like that, and I like it for the same reasons. Because I like that it's well, I already said, but it's very dramatic, and it's kind of loud. I don't know. It's an interesting pacing for a song that sounds like this. Usually expect them to sound a little faster, more upbeat, but it's kind of almost introspective, I think.
It's a good description, I think. I like that.
Yeah. All right, well, we're at the last track of the segment. So, Don, this is a really fun and not at all a typical Tales-sounding track. Probably because we haven't had Goshina score a Tales game in a while.
Yeah, since 2005.
It's been too long.
Well, I mean, he's probably composed a couple of tunes for some of the spin-offs, but he hasn't really, had a chance to contribute a whole CD's worth of music. And you mentioned fun, which is funny because in my notes when I was listening to it before this, even though I've listened to this tune since February, all I wrote was fun, Spanish flavor, fire, fire, fire. And the reason I wrote that is because, as you said, the track is fun. The track is fun. I don't know why I said tune. And it obviously has a clear Spanish, flair to it. And I say fire, fire, fire because it is used in the fire trial dungeon in Zestiria. And I could have chosen a Sakuraba track because some of the tunes are a lot better than some of his previous tunes in the series, but I don't get the chance to, you don't hear something like this in Tales too often, and I don't know what magic Goshina has, what kind of magical powers he has, but no matter what game he composes for, no matter how big or small the game is, he always manages to secure a budget for an orchestra or actual instrumental players. So I don't know how he does it. If it's one track for a fighting game like Tekken, let's bust out the orchestra. Or if it's for this game, let's bust out the orchestra. And then his style is so distinct, even across the whole gamut of game music composers. I like to think of his music as flamboyant. That's how I describe his music, and the fact that this particular track you can have, flamenco guitar, accordion, electronic music, strings, the whole kitchen sink, and throw it all together and make it sound cohesive and like it all belongs together is just a crazy feat.
Yeah, that was one of the things I wrote down listening to this track, was that it had this really great mixing of different kinds of instrumentation, like the Spanish sort of flamenco kind of guitars, and there's some crazy trumpets going at different points, and even some weird moon synths at some point that was kind of what's that doing here, but I like it.
Yeah, it all flows extremely well. And all of the music he composed, he did a couple battle themes, a couple that play in major battles, a few dungeon themes, all for the various elemental trial dungeons, and a few character themes. They really stand out compared to the other tracks on the soundtrack because they actually used, real people playing instruments. Not quite sure why the other Sakuraba didn't get the same treatment for him, because in the past Tales games where he has at least some budget for a few instrument players, like in the Exilia series where they actually have live violin. Those battle themes really stick out compared to the other Tales themes, because I think he writes well when he gets an instrument budget for real players. I think his music is elevated a bit. That's probably what I would say. But all of Goshina's music on here, I absolutely love all 17 tunes, even the crazy Way of Cats, which is just this weird amalgamation of cat meows and chiptune and like kind of jazz, and it makes no sense, but it's a really catchy tune. But most of the music that he wrote on here is pretty catchy and blends a lot of styles together.
I have to look up that song as soon as we're done here.
I think we all do.
Yes, it's. I wouldn't say it's my favorite on there, but it's also one that you can't forget.
It sounds like it, yeah.
And because I know that the Berseria is still part of the 20th anniversary. While it hasn't been confirmed, it would be nice if he were to contribute again. I know that Sakuraba's on board based off of the trailer music that's been revealed so far, but I guess we'll have to wait a little longer to see if Goshina will make another appearance on the next Tales soundtrack. I hope he does.
Yeah, I mean, based just on this track, I hope he does too. I like, besides everything you guys have already said, I really love the bit in the middle where it just goes, suddenly it's acoustic.
Oh yeah, the acoustic solo is really great.
Yeah, it's just an interesting break, and then it goes back to the regular song, but I like that a lot. It's like you said before, it's kind of, a lot of this is unexpected.
Everything sounds like a samba. It's just really kind of just, yeah. Flamboyant is a great word for this. At least I think so. It had me dancing the entire time.
I do too, yeah, for sure.
I do 3.
That's not an expression.
It is now.
Okay, because Caitlin said so.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Some great music, though. I want to listen to more Zestiria music now. That's what these podcasts always do. Just, now I have to listen to more music.
Yeah, even the Zestiria, like Sakuraba stuff, the main theme of that game, which is also the main theme of the character, Saray, it is so simplistic, but I kid you not, it is the one song this entire year that I could hum for, like, on the spot, because it's so simple and so catchy, and it's used in the ending theme, it's used in all 3 of the normal battle theme variations, it's just everywhere, and despite how simple it is, it's only a few notes, it's repetitive, but it's catchy at the same time.
Well, I think we all have a lot of music that we want to hear more of based on your selections. So, and that is unfortunately all we have for this segment, but we're not done. We have more to come. So stick around. But for myself and Mike, I want to thank both Mac and Don for joining us and keeping the Music of the Year tradition alive.
You are super welcome.
Yes, thank you for having me yet again.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, like I said, there's more to come, so keep listening.
Aristides, 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 Aristides.